This is a fan-generated show. If you would like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. Tonight, the fatal flaw in our Afghan withdrawal negotiations. With us by popular demand and backed by popular demand, Phil Haney, the author of See Something, Say Nothing. Phil Haney, what an honor, a pleasure, and a privilege to have you back.
I was really glad to be here, friend. Thank you.
Phil, great to have you back. This evening, we want to talk about the fatal flaw in our Afghan withdrawal negotiations. Before we get to that, you have a fascinating past background. Can you tell us a little bit about when you worked for the Department of Homeland Security, how your investigation was shut down, and if that investigation had not been shut down by the Obama administration, then the San Bernardino massacre most likely would not have happened?
I'm glad to answer that. And by the way, it connects to the title of our presentation tonight. It's connected to the fatal flaw in our Afghan withdrawal policy negotiations. And the story is, I was a founding member of the Department of Homeland Security. I volunteered to help protect our country after 9/11. I had worked a lot in the Middle East as my career in entomology. And so I was very familiar with that part of the world, and I had studied Islamic theology and Quranic Arabic while I worked in the Middle East. But it really had no market value, per se. Nobody really cared that much about it until 9/11. And so when 9/11 happened, I went to see my Congressman Max Cleland in Georgia, a triple amputee from the Vietnam War era. And he wrote a letter on my behalf to Tom Ridge, the first secretary of what was then called the Office of Homeland Security, before it was even inaugurated as a department. And through that, long story short, I became a founding member of the Department of Homeland Security, which was inaugurated in March of 2003. And right away, I started doing intel briefings. One of the very first ones I ever did was CARE, Council on American Islamic Relations, because I already knew they were a front group for Hamas, and you're talking 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, way even before the Holy Land Foundation. But along the way, I also noticed we had a lot of passengers that were coming into the airport that were Tablighi Jamaat. And still to this day, a lot of people had never heard of that group, but it's part of one of the largest branches of Islam in the entire world. It just happens to come from the Indian subcontinent in a city in India called Deoband. But they're Salafi, pro-jihad Muslims, and they're allied closely with Saudi Arabia, with the Muslim Brotherhood, the whole network. So I started doing intel briefings and interviewing these guys, and one thing led to another. I ended up going to the National Targeting Center in Washington, D.C., and started on a case that went then to a project, which is multiple people and organizations, and then it morphed into what we call an initiative, which is a global level case. And we ended up having 1,200 law enforcement actions taken on this Tablighi Jamaat case. And I myself, and I only mention it because to show you how solid the case was, received a commendation letter from the National Targeting Center for finding 300 terrorists related to the Tablighi Jamaat network. That's a lot when you consider all the terrorist attacks we've had are probably less than 30. I mean, here in America, you're talking 10 times that in one case. But alas, in March of 2012, Hillary Clinton and Janet Napolitano sent 7 lawyers from the State Department and 3 high-level administrators over to the National Targeting Center. We all met in an upper room in the Targeting Center, and they opened the meeting by saying, "We have concerns about your focus on Tablighi Jamaat." This is the State Department intruding itself into the law enforcement arena. But that wasn't enough for them. They ended up shutting the case down. Then they deleted all the information out of the system, and then they came after me. 3 simultaneous investigations to try to find a way to either ruin my career or literally put me in jail. And all of that would have been internal. It would have been bad, but it would have been internal except for one tragic event, the San Bernardino shootings. And the day that that happened, when they started posting the pictures of Syed Farouk and Tashfeen Malik on the screen, I literally yelled at my computer. I was working on the book, See Something, Say Nothing, getting it ready for publication. And here comes this news breaking on Yahoo and the rest of the web. A picture of Syed Farouk and his wife Tashfeen going through customs in Chicago. And I just yelled at the computer, that's my case. Because I knew it was Tablighi.
Thank you so much, Phil. So look, what a tragedy. I think it's undeniable that the Obama administration has blood on its hands because of what it enabled and facilitated, and by shutting your investigation down. And then, of course, we can do a whole other program on Fort Hood, on the Boston Marathon Massacre, Orlando, everything that the Obama administration had done to tie our hands behind our back and blindfold us. But Phil, we are withdrawing from Afghanistan gradually or at a certain speed, whatever's going on there. But you are suggesting that there's a fatal flaw in the negotiations going on right now. How do you see it?
Okay, let's go back to the original group we all know of as Al-Qaeda, founded by Osama bin Laden, right? They're in Afghanistan. That's our picture of Al-Qaeda. Would you agree with that? More or less, when we think of Al-Qaeda, we think of Osama bin Laden and the guys over in Afghanistan with AK-47s and so on, right?
Right.
Okay, but the fact is that they never called themselves Al-Qaeda. They call themselves the Global Islamic Front and or the Global Jihad Front. They never themselves called themselves Al-Qaeda, the base. Here's where the fatal flaw begins to emerge. Along with Osama bin Laden, there were 4 other sheikhs of large international Islamic groups that also founded the original group we know of as Al-Qaeda. One of them was Ayman al-Zawahiri, who was an Egyptian, and his group was Jama'a al-Islamiyya, or the Egyptian Islamic Front. It was Muslim Brotherhood, but he's right there next to Osama bin Laden. And then there were 3 other guys that also founded it that are part of Deobandi organizations that I mentioned already. People like Syed Farouk and Tashfeen Malik. Now, that's bigger than most people realize about what we call Al-Qaeda. But in addition to the 5 individuals, there were 14 organizations, macro-level organizations that joined the coalition. And half of them are Deobandi groups. Half of them. Pashto Urdu speaking Salafi Muslim groups from the Indian subcontinent and all the way to the Philippines. Most of our attention has been focused on Arab-speaking jihad groups like Hamas or Islamic State from the Near East, from the Near Middle East. So here's our fatal flaw in a nutshell. You have this large coalition of organizations that's been operating for more than 20 years. And when we think of Al-Qaeda or Islamic State, we're talking about Arab-speaking people from the Near East. So when the Taliban puts their hand on their heart and they tell the American negotiators that they're not going to allow Islamic State to form and operate in their territory, even if they were actually going to do that, which is not going to happen, they could say it honestly, because we never asked them about their alliances with the entire other half of the coalition, meaning the Deobandi groups. The Taliban itself is a Deobandi group. And some of the other names that most people probably haven't heard is Lashkar Janvi, Harakat al-Mujahideen, Harakat al-Jihad, and another one, and we'll tie this in with Sri Lanka, called Tawheed Jamaat. Tawhid Jamaat, the people that did the Sri Lanka bombings, are also Deobandis. So the picture is you have a large branch, two large branches in a tree. We've been focusing on this one branch all this time, 18 plus years, and virtually never talked about the other large branch in the coalition. And now we're going forward with our negotiations in Afghanistan, and we have never discussed the group. And now it's formed a coalition, a new version called the Al-Qaeda of the Indian subcontinent, the largest coalition that has ever existed since modern time. And they created a document that's exactly like the explanatory memorandum. They tell you exactly what they intend to do, what their strategy is, and how they're going to go about it. It's called the Code of Conduct. And their primary goal in this 20-page English document is to go after Americans and Israelis anywhere in the world, and to destabilize the governments of Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and Myanmar. The Sri Lanka bombings fit right into it. And now let's go back in time to the Tablighi Jamaat network here in the United States, San Bernardino, and let's not forget Orlando. The Pulse nightclub shootings were connected to the same network. And now you can see why it was so damaging for the U.S. government to shut this case down. Because it's very likely I'd still be working on it if I was not still in the agency.
So Phil, in other words, there's withdrawal negotiations going on in Afghanistan, but our side is negotiating in some ways with the right people, but being blind to other groups that are involved, right?
Yes, that's right. And how did that blindness happen? Part of it was a deliberate and intentional sequence of events and decisions that were precipitated right inside the agency that I worked on, in the case that I worked on by Department of Homeland Security and the U.S. State Department.
It's a facet of the overall national security meltdown, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly that.
Phil, how come people like you are not advising the president?
Well, that's a fair question, but I really can't give you an answer. It's not for lack of trying. I take every possible venue I can to talk about this, and I feel like a voice in the wilderness. I've been talking about Tablighi Jamaat and the Deobandis for how long? Since the first time I ever went public in December of 2015.
Okay, so at least some progress has been made, because under Obama, as we know, as Stephen Coughlin has documented, how you've documented, all the experts have documented, the Muslim Brotherhood was actually advising the president during the Obama administration, and Obama knew that. At least now, there's good people like John Bolton around Trump, so thank God, but we need better people around him. So we're running out of time here. Phil, what are the consequences here if this kind of blindness continues from our Afghan withdrawal?
The Afghani Taliban are going to draw legions of support fighters into their cause to overthrow the government in Afghanistan and reestablish an emirate and establish Sharia law in the country of Afghanistan. And they can actually said that they kept their promise, because they're not recruiting people from Islamic State. They're coming from the other direction, the Deobandi groups. Keeping in mind the Taliban is the Deobandi group itself.
So if that happens, why did we sacrifice so many American boys and girls over there if this ends up happening?
Well, that's exactly the point. That's why it's a fatal flaw. That's why it's a national security meltdown. I'm not saying that whatever we did, there's no certainty of outcome, but at least we should be completely informed when we go and sit down at the table with individuals that are part of the Taliban and be fully informed. And that's the part that bothers me, is that we're making arrangements and negotiations at this high level, and half of the equation is never even brought to the table.
Right.
At least we would be aware of it. That's exactly the reason why President Trump has reduced significantly foreign aid to Pakistan. because Pakistan has been enabling and helping these Deobandi groups like the Afghan Taliban. So
Trump
it's all interrelated. He's aware, and I'd be the first to agree with you on that.
Right, so Trump is aware, but there needs to be more awareness and obviously, right. Phil, before we go, I know that you would need an hour and a half, but let's say you only had a minute and Trump called you and you had 60 seconds to warn him about the Afghan withdrawal. What would you tell him?
Look at the Al-Qaeda of the Indian subcontinent's Code of Conduct. It's a 20-page document written in English. They tell you exactly what they intend to do, which is destabilize the governments and go after Americans and Israelis everywhere in the world. That's what you really need to know, bottom line.
Do you think that in terms of the threat we're facing, that someone like Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Joe Biden, or Kamala Harris could face this threat in an adequate, good way?
I don't have to imagine. I already went through it. I went through their mentor's government, Barack Obama. I already know what it would be like. A catastrophe.
It would be a catastrophe. Phil Haney, you are a gentleman and a scholar and a brave and noble warrior for freedom and for the truth. Where can our viewers go to hear more from you and to support you?
Well, the book is still on Amazon, only in the Kindle version right now. And I do have a Facebook page. You can look me up on Facebook. And I'm just recently there, but I decided I better find a way to kind of reach out more because things are going to heat up between now and next November. So hold on to your horse hats because things are going to really start going fast. Right. So that'd be the way.
Phil Haney, thank you for your wisdom and for your fight for the truth and for our liberties. Thank you.
Thank you as well.
Hope to see you again soon. Viewers of the Glazov Gang, his name is Phil Haney. Support him on Facebook and get his book, See Something, Say Nothing. And get involved with spreading the truth and spreading all of this vital information that you've heard this evening told to us by Phil Haney. And we will see you soon on the Glazov Gang. Good night.